I'm not the biggest fan of Sonic Adventure. It's not that I think the game is bad or has some giant fundamental flaw that completely ruins the game for me, it's just not really my thing. The game throws a lot, and I mean a lot, of different ideas at the wall with the crazy amount of different characters you can play as that all have their own stories and different styles of gameplay. The best parts of the game are the Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles campaigns, since Sonic and Tails just have you going through typical Sonic stages, and in Knuckles levels you get to use his more robust moveset in these treasure hunting levels that complement his climbing and gliding abilities far more than a traditional Sonic level does. Then you have these other guys. Amy is just slower Sonic with the hammer, Big is just a weird fishing mini game, which while not the worst thing I've ever played, it's still not that great. And then you have the levels with that robot whose name I can't remember where you have this weird lock-on thing to shoot enemies with. Out of these three, the robot clearly has the most interesting and fun gameplay, but it still suffers from the fact that it feels like he is kind of just plopped into levels made more for characters like Sonic. All of this is to say that while I do think the game is fine, I'm not the biggest fan of Sonic Adventure. Wait, crap, I already said that. So after that, you come to me and you tell me that there's a Sonic Adventure 2 and there's no Big the Cat levels? Well then what's the point? They've completely lost the vision of the original game. Sonic Adventure 2 is a game that I pretty much have no nostalgia for since I grew up with all those weird Sonic games on the Wii and didn't really go back and start digging into the series' history until around back in the 2020s when I had absolutely nothing better to do. I played the game, had a decent time, didn't really think much of it, and didn't touch it much afterwards. Then at some point I started playing it again, somehow racked up almost 70 hours in the game, and here we are now. Yeah, I like this game a bit more than the first one. Sonic Adventure 2 takes a lot of core concepts from that first game, weeds out all the unnecessary stuff, and then refines what's left over until you're left with what is, in my opinion, a much better experience. Instead of each character having their own singular campaign, it's instead boiled down into good guy story and bad guy story. Each story consists of 3 different characters, with one being speed, one being treasure hunting, and the final being the shooty lock-on gameplay that the robot did in the last one. I'm not sure what to call it. To me and most others, the speed stages are easily the highlight of the game and what really keeps me coming back time and time again. This game has some of the most strongly designed stages in the entire series since they all have very distinct looks and feels to them while also having gimmicks that make each stage unique without completely changing the gameplay. The biggest addition to the traditional Sonic gameplay here is the rail grinding, and I really like how it is naturally integrated into the stages. While yes, you do occasionally have your more rail-heavy stages like Final Rush and Skyrail, both of which are levels that I really enjoy, most stages have smaller sections you can grind on which allow for some extra points every now and then. And it's not like in future games where you just get on the rail and then it moves you forward. You have to actively balance yourself and crouch at the right moments to actually be able to gain speed and move forward. What really makes these levels work for me are things like the rail grinding, since there is so much stuff like that to get better at and improve on, and the more you improve on these levels, the more fun it is to go back and see how effortlessly you can pull off certain things that felt impossible before. Sonic games are one of the few types of platformers where practice can turn one of your least favorite levels in the game into one of your favorites. Then we have the treasure hunting sections, which I think some people genuinely hate with a passion, and I can kind of understand where they are coming from. Being able to only detect one thing at a time rather than multiple at once like in the last game is annoying, and some of the hiding spots can be a little too cryptic for my tastes, but just like the Sonic and Shadow levels, I think that if you spend enough time learning the layout of these stages and what the optimal ways are to get around, it can make these levels actually pretty enjoyable. In my first playthrough of this game, I was completely miserable in these parts and did not enjoy them at all, but coming back to them to get footage for this video, I was able to beat them fairly quickly without much trouble. Like I said, I get where people are coming from and why these levels might not be super appealing to them, but I've grown far more fond of them in recent times, at least enough to enjoy them when replaying through the story mode. Then we have the final type of gameplay with the shooty lock-on levels, which as stated earlier are sort of an evolution of the same idea that was present in the first Sonic Adventure game. I think the biggest improvement made to it here, and I guess this sort of goes for the treasure hunting levels as well, is that the levels are specifically designed around this type of gameplay. The biggest problem with a lot of the gameplay styles in Sonic Adventure is that pretty much all of the levels are designed first for Sonic, and then the other guys are just sort of plopped in there later. In SA2 though, Every stage is specifically designed for the type of gameplay that will be present in it, making these stages far more enjoyable for me. I think out of the three, this is probably my least favorite gameplay style, but that's not to say that I think it's necessarily bad. I think there are some levels that are genuinely really fun and require you to be fully engaged in it the whole time if you want that A rank. The problem is that most of these levels aren't like that. There's a particular level near the end of the Dark campaign that is genuinely one of the best levels in the game. There is a constant stream of new enemies and other things that you need to lock onto, allowing for some really satisfying chains. I think my problem is that most of the levels aren't like this and move pretty slowly without much going on. In general, I found that Eggman's levels were better than Tails. Not sure why that's the case, but that's just how I felt. But I think that easily the best thing about the levels in this game is that once you beat them and get an A rank, there's still more to do. Each level has its own set of extra challenges, each with its own A rank you need to get. And then once you beat all of them, you get a hard mode version of that stage that puts all of those skills you learned from beating that stage and doing all of its challenges to the test. I'm kind of sad that this idea didn't really stick around for future games. We've gotten challenge levels again, but the idea of having a hard mode version of the levels hasn't ever returned. I think Shadow Generations had a hard mode thing, but I'm pretty sure the only thing that mode doesn't add is a harder version of the main levels, so that's something I would really like to see return. But gameplay and all that stuff, who cares? I play Sonic games for the story. Look, stories in Sonic games are not usually something I care all that much about. Sonic Generations is my favorite Sonic game, and watching those cutscenes feels like I'm being tortured. To me, I like it when games like this just have completely insane stories that are played completely straight. This game is about Dr. Eggman finding an evil Sonic who gives him a laser that he blows up the moon with, then they fight a lizard or something, I don't remember. The cutscenes in this game are absolutely incredible as well. The music is louder than the voice acting, and the voice acting just feels slightly off with the weird pauses, and sometimes the characters just interrupt each other. It's great stuff.
I found you, Faker.
Faker? I think you're the fake hedgehog around here. You're comparing yourself to me? Huh. You're not even good enough to be
I'll
my
make you eat those words.
I do think this story does have some good ideas. Shadow's backstory is easily the most interesting thing lore-wise in the entire series. It's no surprise to me that the Sonic movie that adapts this game is easily the best one. And then the whole game culminates in the coolest moment of any game ever, where two yellow rats fight a lizard while the coolest song ever plays. Then Shadow dies and he stays dead and he never comes back ever again. And that's why Sonic Adventure 2 is my favorite Sonic game. Second favorite. Third favorite.